continuing the Reb Moshe, the Igros Moshe. We are in the middle of Siman Ayin Daled, and this is the part where it gets a bit more interesting. And this is the part where he begins to quote Rav Henkin. Remember? Those three opinions. Who are the three opinions that a civil marriage absolutely requires a get me'ikah hadin?
The Rogachava.
The Rogachava.
Rav Henkin. And the no,
you're almost there. Awesome.
The Chazonish.
Chazonish. Awesome. L'chaim to that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'achanu. Yes. Now, Rav Moshe will now, he's just quoted the Rav Henkin. So we are about a third of the way down the right-hand column here. You with me? The line starts with abbreviation Ayin Shom, Siman Gimel Daled Hey. This is Rav Henkin in his Sefer Perusha Ivra, elaborates on this. Va'af shelechura hayu dvarav nechonim bisvara, says Rav Moshe. Although I am prepared to concede that, as far as logic is concerned and svara is concerned, Rav Henkin indeed has a point. Aval perusha b'sugyas haGemara dochuk. But to say that that is what the Gemara means is a forced explanation. Uberivosh ef shelafarish klal. And you can't say that pshat in the Rivosh anyway. Hoyu me'anusim sheharbe mehen hoyu shomrin masha hoyu ef shelahem betzina. Many of the anusim at the time kept whatever they could. Are you guys with me? Hello?
I think so.
1 second, yeah.
You can't.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Beginning of the line. Sorry. But given that many of them were poruts when it came to having relationships with Gentile women, therefore there's no chazaka. Then the Rivosh writes another reason. Even though we know that they are not poruts liznus, given that after the gezerah there was no access to a mikveh, so he definitely lived with her benidosa. So he's certainly not going to be concerned about the relatively light Isser of Pnuya. Ze vaday she'ha'ene poretz liznus af she'oval lisenida gam kasheyesh mikveh namele choshesh lahav kirish. Says Rav Moshe, but one thing is for sure, even if they are, even if for whatever reason, whether because they're forced by circumstance or because of a lack of yiras shamayim, they're not bothered about mikveh, they're not bothered about anything else, but they certainly are not going to, how should I put this politely, allow other people to be intimate with their wives. That's a leap of faith to a lifestyle or a degenerate value system that we certainly would not, certainly in those days. Even if somebody, for whatever reason, whether because he doesn't care about mikveh or because he doesn't have access to mikveh, Yetzer hara, whatever the reason is, but it's a jump to then say, oh, in those days, therefore there was no exclusivity in this matrimonial relationship. Of course they would have been makbid not for other people to be intimate with their wives. Then of course he won't be choshud to be mafkir ishtay. So he's saying to Rav Henkin, how on earth can you suggest this is what is going on? You're saying, today it's much better. Today we have civil marriage, which means, of course, that people understand that the relationship between the man and wife from civil marriage is an exclusive relationship, and it's limited only to these two people. In those days, however, because they're choshid on niddah, says Rav Moshe, excuse me, one thing's got nothing to do with the other. They weren't makbid on niddah for whatever reason, either because they were forced by circumstance or because they had no yiras shamayim. But to say as a result of that, therefore anybody could be with their wives, as opposed to today's civil marriage where only these two people, it just doesn't add up. It's not logical. It doesn't fit with the Rivosh. He's a very tough challenge to Rav Henkin. And therefore he says, he then Rav Moshe says a really interesting thing, and he displays his knowledge of Catholicism. He says, don't forget, he says, The svara is the other way around. The svara is, today we have disposable relationships. Civil, schmivel, it lasts about as long as a bag of chips. It doesn't mean anything necessarily. But in those days, how do they do it? In a Catholic church. Let me ask you a question. Catholics, do they have divorce? No. There's no such thing as divorce in Catholicism. So there it was for life. There it was exclusive. If you're going to use any svara to say that today they're not mafkir and it's for life, then that is the case you should apply it. The case of in the Catholic Church in Mallorca in the 1400s, boy, that was for life. That was exclusive. It's such a simple point, but Yodua says Rav Moshe, she'uvda da harivosh hoyu b'Sfarad, she'sholta b'hem emunas hanoitzrim katolikin, she'osu lahem lizgarish klal. There's no such concept of divorce. And this is, of course, in the British monarchy, this is the whole story, the whole story with the Yibum and the Bombay Shas, and fascinating story, not for now, but this caused all sorts of issues in the British monarchy, because the Catholics...
That's why they have the Anglican...
That's right, that's why the Anglican Church comes about. Because in Catholicism, marriage is for life. There's no such thing as gerushin. Therefore says, and that was the story with the Rivosh. Therefore says Rav Moshe, V'im kein vadai lokcho isha la'olam. And therefore, absolutely, in the case of the Rivosh, when they got married in this church in Mallorca, Nebuch, it was definitely for life. Not like Rav Henkin wants to say over there. Okay. And therefore, go further down. I'm going to skip a little bit.
Meaning they need a divorce.
Meaning that Rav Henkin is using the following svara. He's saying today, when they civil marriage, forget there's no aroyos and kiddushin, but they are committing to, whereas in that case, they weren't committed. Says Rav Moshe, the other way around is true. Right. Because there was no option of divorce. Right. The logic is the other way around. That's what he's saying. The imkein vadai ira the rivosh, there was no chisaron because there was no edim or anusim or anything else. There were also still many ksherim, and they didn't care about the having edim or anything like that. Over to the next column. Skip about 6 lines, middle of the line. V'kol shekain sheyizbar b'medinos sheyichaylev lehiparid zemizeh kahodim dinosenu al yizdei divorce shel ha'arkois. All the more so nowadays, where we absolutely have this idea of divorce. Ukshetia mekudeshes tia asura b'loy get. Bedin Eishesish v'hu yeser b'cherem d'Rabbeinu Gershom yesh tam gadol shelo yirtzu b'kiddushin deloi k'Rav Henkin shlita. He dismisses the opinion of Rav Henkin. Go down to the last 4 lines before the end of that paragraph, on the left-hand paragraph. V'nimtza ledina halacha l'maisa. Therefore says Rav Moshe. You with me? V'nimtza ledina. Last word of the line is v'nimtza. Can't miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it helps to be on the right page.
Yeah. Goes that way.
Yeah, v'nimtza, yeah, Hebrew, yeah, good. Sorry. V'nimtza ledina, therefore comes out halacha l'maisa. By the way, when I highlight these bits, this is what I did in my copy, just to show you. It'll help you later, otherwise you're just facing a whole thing of text, and you're not going to go through the whole thing again. So it might be a good idea just to mark or to, guys, and then to teach you how to take notes. It's, V'nimtza ledina, shebeperutzin liznus, therefore, it comes out halacha l'maisa, says Rav Moshe. Shebeperutzin liznus lekula alma ein lochush l'kiddushin. If they are porutz, as far as znus is concerned, you don't need to worry about. There's no kiddushin. Uba'ivrin al isa nida and the soita, it's machlekes Rashba and Rivosh. The Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah Paskins like the Ridvosh and the Ridvaz and the Radvaz. So there is no kiddushin here, and therefore no get is required. Turn over the page in the right direction, preferably. So top of the page should say Kuf Ayin Vav. Yes. Yeah. So he says, 3rd line, end of the second line. V'rak kashetekef achan nisui ha'arkois ischilu lodu b'mokim shenimtzoim Yehudim ksherim. Only in a situation. Remember, we're still going back to this shaila. Remember, the woman came from Hungary to Canada. Remember, yes. So we're coming now to the psak din halacha l'maisa. Therefore, only in a case where straight after So the civil marriage, if they began to live in a place where there are frum Jews, and they live together in such a situation where the neighbors know, yes, Mr. and Mrs. Cohen live there. They're not religious, but we know they're Jewish. And they live in the same block or 1 or 2 blocks away from a bunch of frum Jews, then perhaps then we would need to be concerned that there was Kiddushin if they are not Poretz Liznus. Therefore, even though, says Rav Moshe, and this again, as we've stressed, is standard operating procedure for Botei Din, if it is possible to obtain a get, it's a good idea. We should be machmir af b'mufkarin, even if they are mufkar liznus, lochush l'svaras Rav Henkin shlita, to take on board the svara of Rav Henkin. Mikol mokem be'i efshel lahasig get mimenu. If we don't know where the guy is, that was the story over here. This woman came to Canada, the husband has disappeared, then yesh lahatira. Uba uvda zu, and in this case, shedine hamadina shenisu ba'arkei. And in this particular case, when they got married in Hungary, that according to there was an Anmeldung. Remember, you can be Abmeldung. Did I get that right? Abmeldung. You can register and you can unsubscribe. You know, marriage there in Hungary, in communist Hungary, was a bit like an annoying email newsletter. You can just hit the unsubscribe button, kind of thing. Yes. They could just walk away from each other. Then even Rav Henkin would be made that there's no Anan Sahadi, that we cannot say that, we know for sure that they definitely want Ishus. And then here Rav Moshe does something, a really interesting thing. And before we go any further, I want to tell you a story with Rav Moshe. I was reminded of this story as I prepared this tshuva. Rav Moshe, I didn't have the zechus, unfortunately, of meeting him, but I am told by those who knew him, and it's well known, that Rav Moshe was an incredibly soft, he was soft-spoken, he was humble, like all our Gedolim, he was humble. There was an old babushka from Russia who knew him from Lyuban, and she would call him, even after he was the godladder, every Friday afternoon to ask him what time to light candles on Shabbos, and he would answer her with patience and with humility, even though he was and yet there was one story when uncharacteristically he got very
that's when
strident. Did I tell you the story?
Yeah, when the woman came and said that
a Rav had been matir, a well-known Hasidic Rav who had been matir after the Holocaust and Aguna, and he was very stuffed, and then she broke down and confessed that she was just using his name. I'd forgotten I told you the story, yes. Now here, I hear shades of this over here. Says Rav Moshe, but do a bit of detective work, guys. He says to this Rav, do some investigative work. Is she telling the truth? Because at the point in time when she claims to have got married, where the communists took over, it was very clear that there was a period of instability immediately after the communist takeover, and it wasn't absolute 100%. It is clear that it wasn't, overnight. Everybody could only get married through Anmeldung. There was a period, whether it was a period of grace, but there was a period of time in between where still, says Rav Moshe from experience, many, many Jews in Hungary, in the immediate thing of the initial start of the communist dictatorship, people were still able to get chuppah v'kiddushin. It was available. Harayiv nisoyin kedas Moshe v'Yisrael and most of them, yes, you went and you did the Anmeldung. They don't care. You want to then stand in a courtyard with a rabbi and a talent, do what you like. Nobody, and people did that. So who said she's telling the truth? Even places where communist rule has been for more than 40 years, those that want to get married al pi dinei Torah, they know where to go. Usually Chabad, but they know where to go. Yoidim lemi lefanos, they know who to turn to if you want to do it properly. It could be that she's using this idea of the communist regime as a cover for her bad behavior, possibly. Maybe she's lying. Maybe they did get married. Kiddushin. She knows. The guy. If she says yes, we got married, where's the guy? We won't allow you to get remarried until we find him in order to get a get. So she says, you know what I'll say? Maybe I'll say that we just did the Ameldung and we didn't do Chuppah v'Kiddushin. Says Rav Moshe, I'm not convinced she's telling the truth, because many Jews, even secular Jews, but they knew you did, and this is true today, even, many secular, even today in liberal secular democracies, many Jews, if they're marrying each other and they're not marrying out, even though they keep next to nothing, they will have a chuppah. They will have a chuppah. They'll get a rav, very often an Orthodox rabbi, and they'll do it. So Rav Moshe says, I'm not sure I even believe what she's saying. So Rav Moshe is now using this as now he's pushing in the other direction, to saying maybe she needs a get. Maybe she did get married al yidei chuppah v'kiddushin. It's a chashash.
They will enable mamzerus if they let her just marry.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a problem. V'lochein efsha shemishakeres ve'im lo hoyo yodua b'Canada shehoisa nesua. Now then Rav Moshe does an amazing thing, and here I want to tell you another story of Rav Moshe, and at some point we're going to go into this story in more depth as we progress in Hilchos Kiddushin. But for today, I just want to tell you the following story. The story is told of Rav Moshe was being Masada Kiddushin, and he's standing under the chuppah, and he's holding the cup of wine, and he's about to do the bracha, and the mother of the Kala leans over to Rav Moshe and confesses that she had an affair. The mother had an affair when she was married. She'd lived with somebody else, and this Kala is the love child, is a mamzeres.
Wow. And the second of the bracha.
As the Rav Moshe is about to, Rav Moshe said, apparently, so the story goes, Rav Moshe said, Einon ne'emenes, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech ha'olam, without spilling a drop of wine. And that's genius and ge'onos and gadlus at so many levels. Einon emenes means she's not believed. Now why? Well, that's something, a sugi we're going to look into as we go through Hilchos Kiddushin. But to know Torah so clearly, I would imagine even the greatest Rav would say, one second, let me put the cup down. Let me just think for a second. Okay, no. Not a drop spilt from the cup. Torah was on the tip of his fingers. Einon emenes, she does not have halachic credibility for a whole bunch of reasons. Einon emenes, Baruch atah Hashem. Now, we're not, I said, not, he's so eager. We will get there. Now, and why am I mentioning it? Because, en passant, by the way, in this thing, says Rav Moshe, and this is really important, guys, this is very important, chazaka, the status of a person, right, as being married or unmarried. Who establishes such a status? Now, sometimes you establish your own status. She showed up in Canada without a husband. Now, if nobody else remember, this is in the we're talking, I think it was the 1960s. 1960s. So this was not the global village, the digital village, where everybody had access to Google. I think this is a very, very different time. A woman shows up in Canada. If nobody else knew her from Hungary to Canada, the early 60s, probably took a day to fly there, at least. Yeah. So she could have shown up and said, I'm single. And we would believe her. We have no reason to think otherwise. Why are we saying she's married? Because she said she's married.
It's like
Hapeh she'osar, hu hapeh she'heter. Well done, guys. Very good.
The Biro Yadut we have.
That's right. Sehr good.
He comes in and says,
that's right. Toisus in Yevamos. Very good.
Converted. That's it.
Very good. Pesha also says, Rav Moshe, ve'im lo yehoyo yodua b'Canada, shehoisa nesua. If it was not known independently in Canada that this was a married woman, then she has credibility because she's the one who established the thing of that she's married. So now she can say she's not. But if we knew that she was married, then we'd have to go back and make investigations in Hungary. We'd need to be sure there was no Kiddushin, because Rav Moshe's pretty convinced in those days, even secular Jews, they did Kiddushin. If she was in the Komsomol, what do they call it? Yeah? If she was in the, as a communista. Who birur godol shaloi hoya Kiddushin Torah. Sheheim, because the communists, the Yesvektia, they were the Yidden, unfortunately, were the worst anti. They were the worst. Even if they were only nirshum came once you're part of the party, you have to be seen to be towing the party line, and they would not want to be seen to be keeping anything. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, that's all we need from this tshuva. Fascinating tshuva. It ranges, remember, it's 2.5 pages, about 3 pages. Bottom line, he's told us what to do, we've discovered a bunch of things. He is unhappy. He's not happy with Rav Henkin's psak. He does exercise some caution with understanding this woman's situation. Did she get married or not? We have pesha osar or pesha hitir, and therefore he says the Rav really should do 2 things. The Rav should investigate, try and find out, A, did she have independently a status of being married, or is it only through her own admission? That's one point. And then try and give a get to l'chumra, if you can, and if not, it would be okay. Right? That is that tshuva. We then go to another tshuva here. Siman Ayin Hey. And I want to pick out a few bits and pieces from this tshuva. It's not such a long tshuva. It's very similar. I'm not even sure if we need to do it. If they are anoshim ksherim, then we would require a get. If they're mufkarin, go over the page to Kufayin Zayin. Aval b'mufkarin laver al kol isuri teira v'negim k'nochrim. Vaday mufkarim le'isa znus shel kol haroyos. Kol shkein le'isur pnuya ve'ein tzrichin get midina. V'lechein b'makim igun yesh lahatira le'alma b'lei get v'ha'ika ledina. End of the paragraph. She'einot tzricha get. And this is pretty much the standard line. Okay? And he then adds one interesting point. Go to the last paragraph. Let's just do the last. I know I haven't given the whole case, but I'm just trying to save a bit of time here because I want to push on. Last paragraph. Try and get hold of the husband and get a get. If it's impossible, then you can be matir her without a get. But however, he says, if she does not accept to keep hilchas nida, we should not get involved with this case, because then we are being messiah, we're helping Issa Nida. Furthermore, he says, Kol davar shematirin b'shvil takonos ha'agunos. Whenever we bend over backwards to try and be matir and aguna, mistaber shehu b'shomrei Torah. It is logical to assume that we do whatever we can out of sympathy and trying to help this woman. That is for shomrei Torah. De'im loikein lama yakilu. Otherwise, why would Chazal have been makel for somebody who's not keeping halacha? Sharei hulaver al isurin. Why should I be makel in order to enable somebody to be over on isurin? V'tzarechiyun ledina. He raises it as a possibility. Then of course you should try and help her. There are 2 more tshuvas of Reb Moshe. Let's do one. Let's just do one.
Rob.
Yes.
That's there we can also infer that maybe we shouldn't make the public kiddushin.
We're going to come to that as a separate topic. Yes, we touched on it already a little bit. Right. We're going to come back to that. Yeah. Turn over the page again, where it says there's an arrow. Where it says Simon Pei. Mm-hmm. There's 1 or 2 more tshuvas. We'll just finish with these today, and then tomorrow we will learn Rabbi Eliashiv, a beautiful tshuva from Rabbi Eliashiv. Okay, here's the case. This is 1962. Simon Pei. B'sheilasid va'isha ashahoya yudua lepnuya shalei nisas. A woman who we know is not married, but she said that in 1956, on her way to Florida, she got married civilly in a city, Henderson, in North Carolina, which is almost exclusively Gentile. And she lived together with this guy for 2 days on the journey, on the road. They got married on the fly in Henderson, North Carolina in 1956, and lived together with this guy for 2 days. And when they came to Florida, changed their mind. Hine dati. Given that she has credibility from the perspective of hapesha osar hu hapesha hitir, hare loy hoyu kiddushin. That's not kiddushin. Because it was only for 2 days. There were no other Jews, ksherim, that knew about this. And therefore she can marry anybody, no problem. Okay? Another fascinating thing. One more detail here.
Married because that's clearly znos.
Yeah, because it was a 2-day holiday fling.
So Pesha
hit it.
in this case, she
Because if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't know she had civil marriage. She comes along and says, yes, I got civilly married in Henderson, North Carolina, and the marriage lasted for 2 days.
So she basically came and said, I wasn't as honest.
Correct.
So we are like, okay, cool, that's not valid.
It's not Kiddushin.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
not cool, but it's not Kiddushin.
Right.
Next, just go over the page to the left-hand column, top of the left-hand column. No, sorry. On the same page, I apologize. Same page, top of the left-hand columm, there's a star. It says, Ube'inyan Isha. Are you with me, guys?
Yes.
Awesome. Ube'inyan Isha, Shabbat Nekevei Terase, She Yisada Lo Kiddushin. A woman came to the Rav and said, marry me. I mean, not personally, but help me, be Masada Kiddushin. She was married for 13 years to somebody else previously, and that fellow ran away, and she's an aguna. And the Rav starts inquiring about this first marriage, and it transpires that all of the Eidim on the Ksuba were psulim for Edus. One of them was the brother-in-law of the Chassan, and one of them was a reform rabbi. So, and the Chazan was conservative, they are b'cheskas minim, and therefore there was definitely no Eidim Ksherim. And he says there were all Mechalalei Shabbos there, only with the exception of 2. The grandfather of the Chassan and his brother-in-law. And the caterer was also Mechalal Shabbos. And for the 13 years that they lived together amongst Gentiles exclusively. And Shomer Torah did not know anything about them. Therefore, says Rav Moshe, no problem, no get needed. You can just marry them.
They said also that the Masada Kiddushin was a conservative chazan.
Yes. Yeah. And the last thing, just to end off on a spicy note, Rabbi reformer lahagid birchas nisuin tachas achupa. What about allowing a reform rabbi to say bracha nisuin tachas achupa? Hinei birchasei eine klum. Mikivin shehu kofer. He's a kofer. Ve'etzlei have a kidvarim ba'alma ve'ein la'anos amen al zeh. You definitely don't say amen, and probably not a good idea to give him a bracha. And
we asked Rav Oshansky
yes
about calling up a reform to the Bima, giving him an aliyah. So he said this bracha is not a bracha.
Yeah.
Meaning it's not an aliyah.
Correct. Okay, I think we'll stop here for today. We finished the Rav Moshe's. There are more, but that's what. And then we're going to do 2 things in the next few days.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I still have difficulty to understand the Machmirim Shita. So the Machmirim Shita, which it sounds to me like they inventing the Shtei Dinim of
The Rogachava.
Being exclusively with the wife, which requires a get, the Oraisa,
Yes.
and which has which logically makes sense that people can have an exclusive relationship if they are marrying civilly or in the Catholic Church, etc.
Yeah.
But the Gemaras, we would have said it in the Shia, the Gemaras are mashma not like that because the Gemaras technically require a specific type of Kiddushin with Eidim, with everything.
Only so the Rogachava, go back and look at the Rogachava again. The Rogachava will say that is only insofar as the Ishus is concerned, but not insofar as Kinyan. These are 2 separate things. The Rogachava knew the Gemara, right? So Rav Henkin knew the Gemara. The Chazon Ish knew the Gemaras. So they are saying that for a get, 2 things are required. And they're 2 totally separate things. Of course, this is not Ishus. Nobody's saying it's Ishus. But as far as Kinyan is concerned, that is not toiler on the halachas of Ishus. That is their shitta. So the Chazon Ish must have known that. I'm actually trying to research with some chaverim, trying to find out if I can find the Chazon Ish. At the moment, he's just being quoted. I'd love to see whether it's anywhere biksav. I haven't managed to find it yet.
I still don't